welcome everybody. You are here. We are back for another episode of Crypt Ricks. I've been thinking, and I tell you, I'm very, very excited to do this show. It is a show I've been wanting to do for a while, and on a topic that I really enjoyed. I've been enjoying diving into and looking into, and it's a big topic, and it's a topic that once you start looking into it, I mean, you could spend a lifetime just on this one topic, but it's something that, I think a lot of us are very interested in, especially people that are covering the topics that I cover on my show, and that is secret societies. And I know that is a topic that I've spoke to about with a lot of people and watched a lot of information on and presentations, books, and it's a huge topic. And so I was definitely wanting to get a guest on that can talk about this topic, has looked into it extensively, and maybe can kind of, scratch the surface for you guys. And I just want to spark your guys' curiosity and make you guys, after this interview, want to go and start looking into this topic more. Because once you dive into this, guys, you're going to realize how much these secret societies affect our everyday life and how they're infiltrated into pretty much every aspect of our life. And as I said, once you start going and researching this, it's very shocking, disturbing, and it's but very interesting. And I think it's something that everybody should at least look into a little bit to get a little bit of a foundation, and it kind of builds on everything else that a lot of my guests talk about. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview. I've been looking forward to having my guest on for a while now, and I'm so glad that he could take the time. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce my guest here, guys. Welcome. I'd just like to welcome you, Doug Martin, to my show. I'm so happy that you were here and could take the time to come and talk to us.
Thank you very much, Crypt Rick. It's great to be here. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while now.
Very cool. Yeah, I definitely, to let everybody know, I found on the OneGreatWorkNetwork, where I watch a lot of content creators, I found your work. I was recommended to, because a lot of people know that I love looking into the secret societies and this aspect of the occult information. And so somebody recommended your work, and I immediately found your work on the OneGreatWorkNetwork, and checked out your 3 presentations that you did on the origins of secret societies, part 1, 2, and 3. Amazing stuff, Doug. I really enjoyed those.
Thank you so much, Rick, for saying so. I'm glad that you took an interest in it and found value in it.
Oh, 100%. So, I mean, as we were saying off air, Doug, to try to get deep into this topic in a 2-hour interview it's impossible. I mean, so I just wrote down some bullet points that we looked over, and I figured that this is a good, way to start and get people answer some questions that people have. And these are some of the questions I've had people ask me, and I think it's a good way to get people looking into this topic. And it's my hope, and I know it's yours, that after this interview, it's going to at least spark people's curiosity and hunger for knowledge, and they'll start looking into this topic for themselves. So I'm just hoping that that's what we can achieve here today.
Yeah, me as well. It's an important topic, and I'll do the best I can with it. But as you said, we could do nothing but scratch the surface in a 2-hour format. So
right. And so the one thing I talk about is, anyone knows that's watched any of my shows, my interviews, or listened to my radio show, I talk very big on natural law and the real law of attraction. So why don't we start there? And I'm just want to ask you, was natural law and the real law of attraction something that was taught freely back in the ancient times? Like, was that something that wasn't occulted and kind of general knowledge that everybody knew at one time? Or can you kind of give us an idea of like what natural law is, and if it was taught back in the ancient times freely and it was open information kind of?
yeah, that's a very, very important and difficult question. I believe that it was. My work is penetrating anterior to dynastic Egypt, and it's difficult because without the backstory, it's very hard to understand what's happening now. And quite frankly, where classical history picks up is very late in the game, in fact, because what happened in Egypt, the biggest part of our human history is anterior to dynastic Egypt. And ultimately, Egypt did collapse under socialism and bureaucracy, which is basically the cause of the fall of every great nation in history. For many reasons, we have lost that history along with the expression of the ancient Egyptian science and the science itself. And I would definitely say that the science was regarding natural law and understanding unseen forces in nature. So the high science that was achieved by the Egyptians was not technology, it was psychology. And it's
Big
important
difference.
to remember that the Egyptians were also the early astronomers. So the way that they developed their mythology corresponds to the innovations that they have with their with their astrology. I mean, their astronomy.
Right.
So yeah, it is a huge subject, but yeah, I want to put the emphasis on that it is the science of causality, which you're referring to as natural law, that puts us in closest proximity with source.
Right.
And this is what the Egyptians were most concerned with.
Right.
So they could not afford the luxury of dogma, in other words. So truth to them was the most important thing. And not only is it a body of science that has been squandered, neglected, and ultimately compromised and basically lost along with our true human history and our chronology, but that it's a science that we really won't be able to survive without. So
100%.
recovering the science of what you're referring to as natural law is imperative.
Right. I agree. And so definitely, um, yeah, it's such a hard to find out. Like you'd have to go way back to even find out if this was like there's no way of really knowing if this was taught freely or not. Like at least I haven't found that yet. I'm assuming it was at one time. I think it was something that was just a common knowledge thing, and then over time it's obviously been occulted and we can get into that later. But from what you can tell back in the Egyptian times and on, why was the information of natural law and the law of causality, why was that um, why did that start to become hidden and occulted? Like what do you know what was leading up to that? Like why did they have to kind of go underground with this information?
Yeah, there's a lot to the backstory, and then I mean, we can start by looking at the Roman Church.
For sure.
So we have to understand that the fall of the Roman Empire meant the rise of the Holy Roman Empire,
Okay.
and that the Council of Nicaea had taken all of the surrounding traditions and thrown it into the melting pot of their tradition, what we know as Christianity or Latin Christendom in the modern world. And, I mean, in the ancient world, the imperialistic nations would just decimate the populations. But as time went by, they learned to assimilate their culture. And before they would bolster a military campaign against the culture, or any campaign against a culture always begins with a marginalization campaign. So this term pagan basically just means country folk. But see, the implication is uneducated, or let's say beyond the pale
Mm-hmm.
of civilization, barbaric, outside of Roman control, outside of Roman orthodoxy. So it's very important to understand the modus operandi of the Roman Church, because it starts, I mean, Julius Caesar developed and mastered the divide and conquer, but Rome improved on his methods. And the reason that Caesar was so successful was because he better understood culture. And Rome improved on on those methods and learned to assimilate culture. But what I'm saying here is ultimately that Rome became masters of marginalizing and creating a stigma around a culture, but to bolster a military campaign against it.
I
And
see.
Phoenicia is a good example of that. Let's understand that when we're studying history, and we have to work with what we have. This idea that we can just throw history out with the bathwater, it's not a good idea because it's all we have left, and we have to work with what we've got.
I agree.
And there is enough profundities in what we do have. Everybody's looking for the who, what, and where. We need to understand the why and the ideas that are moving through those times. But when we're studying history, we want to pay attention to where the learning is taking place. So
Oh,
pick up classical history with ancient Greece, the learning is taking place in Athens. But, and then during the golden age of Pericles. But as Greece starts to decline from the Hellenic period to the Hellenistic period, the learning is moving back to Alexandria. And
okay.
then the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, under Augustus, it led to the burning of the Alexandrian libraries, and then the learning is brought to Rome. So that's a very important part of the backstory. But
Right.
in ancient Greece, you had Zeno's school of Stoicism, which could be considered one of the earliest secret societies or alternative education sources, or Plato's Academy, that did emerge. But secret societies function in the world have changed with the changing of the culture.
Right.
And even the term secret societies puts a stigma on what I would tell you is the mystery schools.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, so the idea of the secrecy stigmatizes the mystery schools. So we have JFK saying, secrecy is repugnant, and that's true, but we have to understand the need for the secrecy could be even more repugnant. And what that is following the Council of Nicaea in 325 under Constantine, who is Flavian.
Can you just let for the people watching, Doug, know what? Can you give a brief? Because some people might not even know what the Council of Nicaea was. So can you give kind of like a just an overview of what it was and what they were tasked to do?
Well, they were tasked to bring in all of the traditions and figure out what would be, the best doctrine that they could put forward that would allow the status quo to maintain its authority. And the
Wow.
idea is that it's the culture that's resilient, that creates the resiliency to the new doctrines.
Right.
So they're selling you a new doctrine. They don't want old doctrines hanging around that challenge their dogma.
Right.
So that's part of, what we see coming out of the ancient world is an increasing zeal to obliterate the traditions that predate it. And it's usually because they're selling you a new doctrine.
Right.
And the older doctrines would challenge the dogma that we find in the new doctrine. And it's such a long backstory. That's a big part of why people really don't understand it. So if we take a look at Rome, we can start to get a better idea that, following the Council of Nicaea, the heresy hunting became a new sport. So anything non-Christian
Mm-hmm.
or non-Orthodox was seen as a threat to the central institution, which was Rome.
Right.
But we also have to understand that what Rome is doing is a political prospect. It's not really a spiritual prospect. And like I say, the heresy hunting had become the new sport, and that is the fleshing out and the rounding up of any other traditions that would create opposition for its new doctrines.
Very
And
interesting. So this must
yeah,
be where
see,
the
so
this must be where the start of the secret societies, and that's the way I'll just call them, um, probably started. Correct, like because as you were saying, the Romans, if you weren't going along with their program in a easy way to put it, and going along with what they wanted you to, the doctrine they wanted, then you were rounded up and taken care of. So I'm assuming that that would be kind of when the secret system, this information kind of, people were practicing it on the down low kind of thing, and where the secret societies kind of maybe got their foothold.
right. Well, the fall of the Roman Empire meant the rise of the Holy Roman Empire, and then with the
Right.
Council of Nicaea, a very zealous, um, a zeal to obliterate any type of learning
Mm-hmm.
that was not coming from the priest class or the monks of Rome. And then we're entering into the Dark Age. So what we know about the Dark Age is very sparse. We've only got a few chroniclers, and then most of what we know comes from tombstones and eulogies.
Right.
But and there's ambiguity that we're dealing with. But it's, following the Council of Nicaea, actually, at the end of the Dark Age is where we start to pick up the scent and the emergence of these secret societies. But the uh, the studious scholar can probably trace that back anterior to classical history, at least into the 18th dynasty
Wow.
of the Egyptian pharaohs. But my work goes much farther back and penetrates anterior to dynastic Egypt, and my contention has been that the evolving of the religious impulse that started in Egypt was really a truth discovery prospect, and it did cause human evolution. And the evolution that occurred in the Nile Valley. So this implies that it takes sanctuary. But what I'm saying is that as the mythos evolved forward, each time it would have a significant change in the mythology. They would send out caravans to take the new traditions out of Egypt and try to preserve them in other parts of the world.
Okay.
And then with the changing, and then, because the original started out keeping time and circumpolar constellations starting in the south and then moving into the north. But when they move into the lunar phase, that's going into annual cycles and then ultimately end up in the solar phase, which has been going on for the last 100,000 years.
Correct.
Each time they're changing types as well. So they're straying farther from source. But each significant change, they're sending out caravans. And I've said that, I would call the first secret society, the first caravan that was sent out as a contingency for the halfway point in what I call the stellar mythology or the stellar mythos in Egypt, because they came out of the south and went into the north. So they knew there was danger in that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And, we can get into that later on, but it gets pretty advanced and deep at that point.
Right.
And it's a contentious, it's a contentious, statement about it, or it's a contentious thing to say,
Mm-hmm.
because academia has not acknowledged this lost history.
Right. That's very true. And I always think, because you brought up the Library of Alexandria and how it got burned, and I'm just thinking, can you imagine all of the information that was lost in that taking place? That we'll never know what was in there, and the amazing information and discoveries that were in there. It's such an upsetting thing when you think about it, how that was destroyed.
And it wouldn't have been the first time that it happened, because my contention has been that the pinnacle of the Egyptian mythology and eschatology happened in the cult of Osiris, which means that everything after that basically was a downgrade.
Right. Right.
However, that still constitutes an evolution of the mythology, which evolved all the way into Christianity, which basically represents the pinnacle of what came out of Egypt and the Egyptian mythology. But it also branched off into another tradition that became a neo-chivalric order we know as the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of Round Table. That's why we find so many parallels in the Arthurian legend and the Christ story. So it's no irony, because we're dealing with a solar doctrine.
Right.
But what I was trying to say is that what was destroyed in the Battle of Actium and burning of the library in Alexandria was largely would be what I would call Neoplatonism.
Okay. And can you
Eh,
let people know what that is? I'm sure some have never even heard of it.
Okay, well, Plato was the Greek philosopher who did, get initiated in Egypt, and he got, the body of knowledge that was still left in Egypt. See, one of the contentions that I make is that we have the same dilemma today that we had at the beginning of classical Greece and classical Rome and classical history, is that we did not understand the Egyptian sign language, and which is the expression of the Egyptian science as well as the science itself. So the sciences have the Egyptian science was compromised because we don't understand the sign language,
Right. I remember you saying
and
that in your presentation. I remember that was
and the
very interesting.
expression
Right. The
and the
expression.
expression of the science. So, I tell people Jesus spoke in parables, not because he wants to riddle you into confusion, because he understands that the whole brain must be engaged. We have to understand the abstract as well as the empirical science.
Mm-hmm.
We can't ignore unseen forces, and seems to be the case in modern quackademia.
For sure. Very interesting. Yeah, I remember you saying that in your presentation when I was watching it. I was like, and that makes a lot of sense. And I haven't heard a lot of people even talk about that. So very interesting. And I could dive into each one of these, just one of these topics that we're covering. I could dive into for the whole interview, but I want to try to touch on a lot of different things to give people a good foundation, because I know that I'm going to be having you back probably in a month or two. So we can continue to build on this. But what I've had a couple of people ask me is, how back in the day would somebody even get initiated into one of these secret societies? Like, do you have is there any information that they're letting us know, kind of like who was chosen or what they had to go through? Because it was definitely not as easy as it is today to find information at your fingertips.
Yeah, the main thing is, like I say, the function of the secret society has changed, and it had changed even at the time of the Neoplatonism. But let's say during the time of Neoplatonism, which I wanted to talk a little bit
Yep,
more
go ahead.
about,
Yep.
the Neoplatonism is about the learning having moved from Hellenic Greece back to Alexandria.
Okay.
So that means that the learning had, ended in Athens essentially, and Athens went into decline and moves back to Alexandria. So some innovations and progress was made in the Neoplatonism in Alexandria. For instance, the Hermetic principles,
Mm-hmm.
um, and those are part of understanding natural law. But they're not the entirety of the science, and they're not the entirety of the septenary, because the ancient old Egyptian science deals largely with the seven and the septenary.
Mm-hmm.
In fact,
Correct.
that's what the pyramids are really about, but so much more. But I would tell you that the pyramids were a contingency for the slide into moral relativism and social Darwinism and ultimately eugenics.
Really?
So,
Okay.
yeah, which is the slide away from natural law. And as you know, this term natural is stigmatized by Darwinism, and Darwin's work is hard to understand because we have his findings, and then we have his early suppositions, and then his later hypotheses, and then at the end of his life, his conclusions about it. And the cultural Marxist had taken his original publications and ran with it as the foundational
Mm-hmm.
science for cultural Marxism, which created a cultural meme. But
Yep.
what you have to also understand and consider is that John Baptiste Lamarck's work was published 50 years before Darwin, which describes a cooperative instructive process in nature, whereas the Darwinism was describing a competitive process in
Mm-hmm.
nature.
Yep.
And we could look at that like, those are the choices that we really have. Do we want to help each other? Or do we want to kill each other?
Yep.
And that's kind of what it comes down to. But yeah, these are big subjects. So I hope I'm not getting too far out,
No,
and I
not
hope
at
I'm
all.
I'm not leaving, or I hope I'm addressing the full question that you've presented there, because these are just difficult, and there's so much.
Right. That's what I was saying. Like, you to dive into, you could, each one of these topics you could dive into for a whole show, just
Absolutely.
covering it. And definitely I agree with you when you bring up when I try to talk to a lot of people about natural law, I agree with you 100%. They automatically usually bring up Darwin and survival of the fittest. Like, they really they've done a good job of making people think that for sure by social engineering and manipulating, because that is usually what I hear. That's they ask me, is that what I'm describing or what I'm talking about? So definitely very interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's, it seems to be, like I say, Western thought differs so radically from ancient thought,
For sure.
and it seems to be, a form of imbalance, typically in an intellectual left brain imbalance, but we also have the religious fundamentalist right brain imbalance. In fact, let's talk a little bit about that.
For sure.
Understand we have this phenomena called postmodernism. I think we should recognize, which is the idea that you can just go with your feels and just,
Right.
filter out anything that makes you uncomfortable and things like that. Have to understand that that would be coming from a Greek ideal, because the Greek had the democracy.
Okay. Right.
So if they could get people to just, all just, have their own opinions about things, and nobody would agree on anything. We have to understand that democracy represents a mob rule that represents rule by the most ignorant. So the aristocracy or ruling class could champion that because they knew they could sway the masses, and get everybody infighting, which would bolster their new oligarchy, which is, also, let me just say this too, to understand the emergence of Greece and Rome in the ancient world, it's important to understand that, they're coming out of an era of theocratic monarchy, which is non-secular.
Right.
And the idea is that the Greek democracy was a contingency for that becoming a tyranny, and then the Roman Republicism, just the same. That's a form of nationalism, or is this contingency for theocratic monarchy. So the word king was anathema to the Greeks and the Romans. And that's interesting when the Roman Republic collapses and we see the rise of the Caesars, because they don't want to use that word king, and that's why Augustus's policies were so successful, because though he was a dictator, he still held the power but did not use the power. So
Right.
the power, and then allowed the consulship to stay in place, which allowed what's known as the Pax Romana to be extended for almost 200 years in the succeeding Caesars who tried to uphold Augustus's policies.
Right. Very interesting. And I just find it interesting too that you said about the way they about the feelings, and that's how a lot of people approach it. I just when you brought that up, I just kind of think of the new age religions that are out there, and the stuff that they're teaching out there. About if it makes you feel uncomfortable, don't address it. Kind of ignore it. And you're right that is kind of where the new age teaching that I've at least looked into. It's very weird how they're into that. Like if it basically it's all about your feelings, and I think that's just not the right way to go about it at all. You have to look at everything, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not. That's you can't just stay happy all the time, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. You have to do the eclectic study. It's called comparative religion, because we
Right.
need to know. If you know a lot about one tradition, that's great, because that way, when you start to get knowledge about the other traditions, you'll start to be able to contrast those and make those comparisons. And then where you find that ubiquity is where the piece of the puzzle is that you're going to need.
Right. And
So
a lot of
yeah.
people aren't even looking into other religions, correct? Like they kind of get like Christianity, for example. They kind of like, and a lot of them, I think people don't even realize what it means to be a Christian or the true meaning of it or anything. That's kind of a label they take on, but their actions never show that by any stretch of the mean. It's kind of like a label, and I think that's a lot with the big religions, and I think that's it's just interesting. I think.
Yes, it's, coming from the Gnosticism that predated Rome. The Christ tradition was already in existence, and
Right.
it was
Yep.
spread throughout the Fertile Crescent and throughout the ancient world, and the Mediterranean basin, and even into Europe. And like I say, Rome had created this melting pot of Latin Christendom, which is not really the pure tradition. And
Mm-hmm.
it was let me just say, it was the anthropomorphizing of the deity, along with the literalizing of the gospel or the scripture, and the historization of this, the historization. So the literalization and the historization is what obscured the pure teaching.
Right, right. Very super interesting. Yeah, definitely something that I hope people start looking into these topics, because the more I know that I'm diving in deep, digging into it, the more I'm learning. And you're right. It goes so far back, and there's so many moving parts to it, kind of thing. Like so many things happening over history that I find truly fascinating to learn about, because it kind of shows why we are now in history right now, why we're here and how we got here. So I'm hoping that people listening to you, Doug, will start looking into these topics independently for sure. The one thing I wanted to kind of, and I found great about your presentation too, was when we were kind of, you were talking about like some of the major secret mystery traditions and which are Freemasonry, Tarot, and Cabal. Can you kind of touch on those, like, and how they play together, because they do interact and work with each other?
Absolutely, they do. And if you were to study one without the others, you would only have a partial teaching.
Very important. Yep.
Okay, now I want to back up just a minute.
Okay.
Part of what I want to say, about modern Western thought is we are lacking the knowledge to get the bigger picture. And the way that we think is not, I mean, we're going to have to improve our ability to have more correspondence in our thinking.
Right.
And we're only going to learn these types of correspondences by learning the mysteries, and we'll need these tools and methods to do that. My experience has revealed to me that the masonry, what we call Freemasonry in the modern world, is Egyptian science
Right.
that goes all the way back to the beginning, coming out of totemism into the first hero cult, and it constitutes the very first religious impulse in man. And the evolution of that impulse up to a point is the development of the Egyptian science, but at a point it strays so far from source that the ideographic types that represent the expression become obscured to the point, especially through the anthropomorphizing or
Mm-hmm.
personifying the deities or naters, that the original teaching it becomes, through neglect, unrecognizable. So
Correct.
that constitutes a failure in the priest class. And the evolution of the mythology corresponds, with the straying from the source, which represents a deterioration. So it gets very difficult to understand there. But I just wanted to say that about it, and I have so much more to say about it.
Whatever you want to, whatever, Doug. If this is your, whatever you think is
Yeah.
important.
Well, your question was very good, and I want to try to address it. It's and just trying to, but I'm trying to put the emphasis on understanding the correspondence. You're trying to pick up on the sublime information,
Right.
because that's how the universe is actually speaking, through form. So we have to understand form and symbolism, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it's very biased and ambiguous if we come at it trying to go through academia, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
because, like I say, we have the same dilemma now that we had in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, where we don't understand the Egyptian sign language. And quite frankly, my research has shown me that we basically, following the cult of Osiris, which I've said ended about 40,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
um, we've got, it's been a decline into what became what we know as modern religion.
Right.
And that
Very interesting too that you say
yeah.
that it is a decline, and it's very noticeable when you start looking into it. Like something happened for sure.
Yeah, and it's, negligence is part of it, but yeah, that's what I was trying to say, is there's actually a period of nescience,
Mm-hmm.
which means that once it had been lost, there was no real way for all this time to recover it.
Oh,
So it's only been since the post, the beginning of the Renaissance, where the Eastern traditions began to make their way into the West, and then the return of learning, and then the age of enlightenment, and then we have to understand that the philosophers in the age of enlightenment have actually done some damage, and I have even more respect for the philosophers of ancient Greece because John Locke and Adam Smith and Rousseau, and I mean they definitely were inspired by the ideas for freedom. But again, freedom was such a new idea. They really didn't understand everything that they needed to understand. And, and my experience, like I say, has revealed to me that it's because of what we know about Babylon and Egypt that we've only known for the last 100 years. Do we have an opportunity to rediscover the Egyptian expression of the Egyptian science?
Right.
And we're going to need that to solve this dilemma. So.
Right. So it's definitely about knowledge and this hidden knowledge that has been lost for and that the fact that you bring up that it's only been really around for 100 years, that's not a lot of time to for people to get caught up, so to say. Like there's a big gap where this information wasn't even available. So we have some work
Yeah,
to do.
I agree, and I'm glad to hear you say that because I don't like always being the one having to say it. But yeah, we got some work to do, and my experience is it's going to take real scholarship and an uninterrupted study of our best minds. What does it take to move men to truth? We have to understand that they have a vanguard around their tenure,
Exactly.
and they have a vanguard around their status quo.
which
So
stops which stops them from learning. Correct? They don't even want to look into anything that may damage that or
yeah, or the people are clinging to their dogma or whatever it is
100%.
that's holding them back, you know, um, is really going to result in more suffering. And I don't know how else to say it. So,
That's perfect. That's 100% true. That's what's happening right now. I've been telling people.
it was the zeal of the new orthodoxy that created the need for the secret society.
Okay.
Okay, and then when the secret societies began to emerge in the West, see the Greek learning continues in the East in the Byzantinism,
Mm-hmm.
but in the West it's restricted
Right.
by the monks and the Roman Church, and they are imposing their Latin Christendom on a largely illiterate masses, and they will only allow you to receive knowledge from their priests, and that created the aesthetic dryness.
Exactly.
And
Right.
yeah, but with the so we had the artisans and even Christians and Jews and probably Gnostics as well, starting to aggregate in the Languedoc southeastern or southwestern region of France, and then at a lot of people, they know about the Crusades,
Right. Yes, I've
but
had
they
people ask me
but
about that too.
but they don't know about the Albigensian Crusade, and it was Pope Innocent III that ran that crusade through there, and it was a 20-year campaign.
Yeah, you don't hear much about that, do you?
No, you hardly ever
Yeah.
do, and they killed Christians and Jews alike. I'd said that Innocent or a bishop of Innocence had said, how will we know whose is ours? And the Pope replied, kill them all, and God will know His own.
Wow.
So yeah, it was Christian killing Christian, and there's a lot of reasons for that because, as I said, um, Christianity, in fact, is a spiritual prospect. Ultimately, that will become a threat, but they did use it as a political device through the Dark Age and up
Yep.
through the Renaissance as powerful political device. And
For
as
sure.
we know, it's left a lot of carnage in its wake.
Right. And it's scary how far it goes back, Doug. Like to like how this has been going on for so long, and the suppression of knowledge and pulling people away from source, as you were saying. And when we look into the true forms of, like, the pure forms of Freemasonry, tarot, and Cabal, is that's what those teachings are, correct? Is trying to
Yeah, that's
awaken
what I was
people to
trying to get
source.
back to. Yeah. So my experience is that the Masonic symbolism can be traced all the way back to the very beginning of the first hero cult
Interesting.
in Egypt. And I would even go as far as to tell you that the menorah is more than 150,000 years old, and that predates the
Wow,
pyramids.
for sure.
And
Wow.
the menorah in the pure form is the septenary. It is the seven, which I would tell you represent these seven glorious ones, which are these seven stars of Ursa Minor with Polaris as the pole star. But it is also the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Right. Right. And
Okay, so we
yes,
look at yes, so it's all in that menorah, and that symbol is that old. Now, as far as tarot, I would tell you that what I has always seen as an advancement in the Kabbalistic tradition, that I see as something that was designed to be a portable tradition that could be carried out of Egypt.
that's I never thought of it that way.
And
Very true.
and by that basically, to really uh, try to pinpoint the antiquity that it has would be difficult, but in my experience, it is very ancient. It seems to have come, possibly even out of the lunar phase, and that would be more than 100,000 years ago.
Oh
So
yeah, for sure.
at least the concept of the tarot is very ancient, and as we can see, if we look at the some of the Egyptian tarot decks versus the AE weight deck, they're quite different, but the expression is the same. One thing I did notice about the Egyptian is it has less, and that's what you're going to find in the Egyptian science is they're trying to store more knowledge in less symbols. So keep that in mind.
Very interesting. And then over time, it's just been added to, um, from what the Egyptians originally had, which is very interesting how they've added
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, because I could say, well, it's all Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that would create a huge controversy.
Right.
But it's truly all the Egyptian science, which you could call the craft, which predates the term. So, the real dilemma that we have and the real adversary that we're faced with is a colossal ignorance.
Right.
And that colossal ignorance is a result of what happened in Egypt. It's a result of what happened in the evolution of the religious impulse
Right.
and the religious idea that came out of Egypt, which I've said in its earliest phases, not only constitutes the largest body of knowledge that we had ever developed, um, but it's a science that we simply won't be able to survive in the world without, because it took so long to develop and methods to teach it to develop, and it's designed in such a way that it does create a contingency that if it became compromised through dogma, which is what happened,
Exactly. Yep.
it could be recovered. And the more we study what the pyramids are, the more we're going to find out that that's exactly what they're a contingency for.
Right. And that's then, and a lot of the ancient structures that they're even finding now, I find very interesting. Like they're like definitely it goes back way further than they ever thought. That's for sure. When I think of some of the newer discoveries they're making, and I've definitely been somebody has been looking in Egypt for a long time, and the stories always, you've got so many people saying different things, like nobody's really agreeing on anything, I find, and not even willing to look at new discoveries. I find that scary too, Doug, that as you were saying about tenor and them being very stuck in this dogmatic belief and they don't want to look at anything new. And so it's no wonder we're kind of stuck in this where we are now, where people aren't even willing to look at this information, which is so important that we look into, as you were saying, Freemasonry and tarot and Cabal, look at it as in a whole. And I don't see people doing that enough.
That's the right way to look at it, because it all is imparting the same teaching, and it comes from very rudimentary archetypal ideas and then unfolds.
Right.
So in that, it is designed to be able to collapse back into its purest form.
Which is
And
source.
that, well, yeah, its original form, which are basic archetypes: circle, square, and triangle.
Triangle. Right.
Because like let's say circle dot, which is source for all seeing eye.
The
You can
symbol.
see
Right.
that. Yeah, if
Yes.
you can see that. Circle dot predates the solar doctrine. So in solar doctrine, circle dot represents the sun, but it predates solar doctrine back into the stellar, and that represents pole star. And then primarily in the north, because it had moved out of the south
Mm-hmm.
and then placed in the north in Ursa Minor. So part of my contention has been that's what the pyramids were built for, as a contingency for primacy in the north, because their priest class understood the danger of moving, because the southern hemisphere was associated with night sky and spirit realm.
Right.
So it gets very disorienting when you flip everything upside down like that. So that's part of what the pyramid project was the contingency for that inversion.
Right. Very interesting. I definitely, that's very interesting, Doug. And something I'm definitely going to be looking more into. I think they are starting to prove that. I think more people are starting to see what the pyramids really are. Like, I mean, I remember when I was young, they were tombs. Like that's what they were saying, and they had all these different stories. So I do see that they are making more progress. It's slow, from what I can tell, and there's still a lot of people arguing, but at least they're starting to, I think, realize what the pyramids really are and the significance of them. Do you feel
I
that
would
way?
agree. Well, I would agree in the sense that I think more people are starting to take an interest in it.
Right, right,
But when I listen to the rhetoric, I do hear a tremendous deficit in the rhetoric and in the knowledge.
right. So we got a lot of work to do.
But let's keep going, forward from Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Let's keep in mind that, my contention has been that by that point, the Druids had all been obliterated throughout Europe.
Hmm.
Although we still have Druids going up, through the height of the papacy and the end of the Dark Age, I would tell you that they were essentially imposters standing in there, or charlatans, past Nicaea, and that Rome's occupation goes farther back in Britain than most people are aware of as well.
Wow. Okay.
And I've made the contention that our way home, which is back to Egypt, is through Britain, because there's more surviving earthworks there. And when we look at Stonehenge, one thing we want to pay attention to with Stonehenge is that those temples were littered throughout Europe, and now
That's
they're
true.
essentially obliterated. You can't find them anywhere. So it's not what we're seeing, it's in the landscape, it's what we're not seeing. And I want to make the point that the term druid is confusing, because typically that would imply a solar priest.
Right.
But the caravans that I told you coming out of Egypt have been coming out of Egypt before even the solar doctrine. So the Druids were the sort of wandering secret society, so to speak. And that brings us to the other hot controversy about the Knights Templar, because I've been studying the Templars for a while, and that's a difficult subject, but I'm starting to get this notion that this controversy about this Opus Dei
Right.
in 1099 was an attempt to bring a chivalric order under the control of the Roman authority. And prior to that, it seems, like I say, we're talking about a dark age and an obscured history, but what I'm starting to get from this is that the Hospitallers were this chivalric order that predated the Templars, and they basically acted like a vanguard for tyranny, and they kept the elite power classes in check. So I think that the move to bring the Templars under the Roman order or the Roman authority was an attempt to neutralize the Hospitallers. And that's a very controversial
For
statement, but
sure,
I'm going to
right?
go ahead and make it.
Well, if that's where your research is leading, Doug, then I don't blame you. And wow, it's so disturbing when you think of how this is goes so far back, and the suppression of knowledge and wanting people to follow a certain way of thinking is the best way I can put it. Sorry, I'm not have a better way to describe it, but it's very disturbing when you see how far this goes back. I think a lot of people think that it's something modern that is kind of just happened recently, but it goes, as you're saying, it goes back to the start of very beginning.
It's very, very ancient, and
Wow.
they want to keep us in this tiny box because as long as we're in that tiny box, we're never going to be able to fit the truth in there. So
So keep people in that box, keep the knowledge away from them, and you have somebody easily controlled. I believe.
yeah, and it's easy, understand that it's easier to ascribe to an authority or ascribe to a belief system than it is to actually learn the knowledge. And that's kind of important because, that's kind of the easy way out. But see, not only that, if you go against the grain, then you're basically meeting resistance,
Right.
and you will be ostracized in your constituency and basically have your career ruined for you or worse.
Yep. Yeah, I was just gonna say that you're definitely ostracized, and they make an example out of you very quickly, and so it shuts people off from even wanting to look into anything like what we're talking about. So definitely, it's gonna take courage for people to start doing this and work.
Um, Mark Twain has a good quote: "In religion and politics, people's beliefs and convictions are, in almost every case, gotten at second hand and without examination from authorities who have not themselves examined the questions at issue, but have taken them at second hand from other non-examiners whose opinions about them were not worth a brass farthing."
Wow.
Mark Twain.
I mean, perfectly said. Wow.
So yeah, we are dealing with the colossal ignorance, and we shouldn't. It's not to condescend anybody. I'm trying to lift people up and encourage them to do the diligence, because I would tell you the finer things in life are understanding the human history and are
Mm-hmm.
understanding the classicism. Alexander wept when he saw the breadth of his domain, for there were no more worlds to conquer.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing to understand and understand where Alexander the Great was coming from when he made that statement and why it's so profound, and understand that having the classicism, those are the finer things in life, and the literature, and I want people to get excited about it,
Me
even though
too.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of a morose guy.
Yeah.
But let's keep on with this because
Well, we definitely. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here, Doug, because we do know we have to take. So everybody know we got to take a 5 minute break. So in probably about. Let me just check the time, guys. So about 3 or 4 minutes, we got to take a 5 minute break. So if you guys got to get up, stretch, make a coffee, do whatever you got to do, we'll definitely be coming back for a second hour and covering a lot more of these topics with Doug Martin, and we're definitely, as Doug said at the beginning, we're just scratching the surface, and we're trying to kind of lay a little bit of a foundation for topics that you guys can look into deeper. And once you do, guys, it is so interesting, as I was saying, and I think the information is invaluable. That this is something that people need to look into, and I think once you do, it's gonna really start making you want to learn more and more. At least it did for me, and I'm sure it was that way for you too, Doug.
absolutely it was.
Right. Yeah. I'm just hungry for this knowledge. So, I
So
mean,
we've yeah.
go ahead.
So we've got a couple more minutes before the break.
Yeah, sure. So why don't we just we got like 2 minutes. So why don't
Let
you
me
let people?
let me set us up for the break then.
Perfect. That's what I was going to ask you to
I'll
do.
make two big points here, and then we can come out of the break dealing with
Perfect.
these. Okay, I've already said that the word king was anathema to the Greeks and the Romans.
Hmm.
What I want to say is that if we really want to understand this world, there's two things that we have to understand. Number one, the modus operandi of the Roman Church. And we can find that that modus operandi predates the Roman Church and goes back to Babylon, but we can get a better look at it dealing with Rome.
Right.
So we have to understand the modus operandi of the Roman Church, which is to marginalize any culture that they can't assimilate and obliterate anything non-Christian or anything that would challenge its dogma, and that it's the most zealous phase of this solar cult that is obliterating ancient knowledge. Number two, we have to understand divine right of kings, and we have to understand the difference between continental Europe, which is absolutism, and what is unique in Britain is that there's a sharing of power between the English throne and the land barons or the aristocracy. So those are two very important things that we have to understand to genuinely understand the world we're living in today and the need for the secret societies, what I want to call the mystery schools. As I
Mystery
said,
schools.
the term secret society is the stigma.
Right. Mystery schools, yeah, definitely is more accurate too. I mean, yeah, definitely. So that's what I would call them too, for sure. So great 2 points that you brought up, Doug. So I'm definitely gonna let everybody take a break. Like I said, we're gonna take a 5 minute break. So do what you need to do. Make yourself a coffee, have a stretch, and we will be back for the second hour. We are talking with Doug Martin. We are talking about the origins of secret societies, but not just that. We are covering a lot of other important topics, guys. So please stay tuned, and we will be back in 5 minutes, guys. And just make sure you mute your mic there, and we'll be right back, guys, in 5 minutes. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back. Hope you guys all had yourselves a good little break there, got yourself a stretch, and did whatever you had to do. We are back here for the second hour. We are here with an amazing guest, Doug Martin, who is breaking down the origins of secret societies and so many other important topics that I think you guys should definitely look into once we're done this interview, and it sends you down the path of looking into this information, because I think you guys will find it very, very helpful, very informative, and will definitely start giving you a great foundation for a lot of the topics that I cover on this show and that Doug covers on his presentations. You can find Doug's presentations on the One Great Work Network. He has a lot of great content there, a lot of great stuff. He's got the 3-part series to the origins of secret societies. I highly recommend it. That's what made me fall in love with his work, and I hope you guys check that out. Lots of other great content creators also on the One Great Work Network. So much information on that one place. So definitely, guys, I will leave a link in the description to find Doug's work and the One Great Work Network, and I suggest you guys definitely check it out. But let's go ahead, and I just want to welcome my guest back onto the show. Hi there, Doug. How are you doing, my friend? I hope you had a good little break there.
Very refreshed.
Me too. Yep, that little 5-minute break just makes all the difference. So I like to do that just so people can get up and kind of stretch, because these interviews do get along. It's 2 hours, and but I really do appreciate everybody that's watching and who is interested in taking in this information and being willing to look at it. I really appreciate every one of you guys that are watching. It means so much to me, and I know it means a lot to Doug too, that you're willing to look at this information that they're hiding from us and not wanting people to find. I think that's key to point out. So, all righty. So I'm just trying to look, Doug. Where is there anywhere that you want to start off with the last 2 points that you made, or do you just want to
Yes.
keep going down? All right, let's do that then.
Yes, we went into the break, and I mentioned that we have to understand the modus operandi of the Roman Church, and we have to understand the difference between historically continental Europe, which was absolutism, and the sharing of power between the throne and the aristocracy in England.
Okay.
Because the differences between that, or those differences, are what allowed these Eastern traditions to emerge into the West where they otherwise would not have.
Okay. Perfect. So I think that, yeah, definitely something that we have to
So,
get break down. So if you want to do that, I think that'd be great
yeah.
to give people
It,
a general understanding.
so as I said, the word king had become anathema to the Romans and the Greeks, but by the time we get to the kings and queens of England following 1066, which was the Norman invasion in England, um, the divine right of kings is overt,
Okay.
where it's covert. So we have terms like emperor and Caesar in Rome, for instance. But by the time we get to the kings and queens of England, it's overt, the divine right of kings, and upholding the pedigree of the divine right of kings. So to understand the modus operandi of the Roman Church, we have to understand that when they begin a campaign against a competing culture, it always begins with a marginalization campaign. That's what I mentioned. The word pagan was used to marginalize anything non-Christian. Of course, they could not marginalize and throw the Jews into that gang because the Christianity was built on top of
Right.
Judaism.
Yep.
So the main point I'm making is that um, Rome learned to assimilate culture, but they also learned how to stigmatize anything non-Roman or non-Christian. Like, for instance, the example of this Luciferianism being associated with Freemasonry.
Right. Very true.
Uh, and so part of our dilemma, just like in politics and political science, we have a semantical dilemma, and we don't understand the terms. And I would tell you that I described this in my first presentation, but Luciferianism is about the solar cycle in the day sky, or the year annual cycle of the rising of the sun in the east, with Venus appearing in the east and identified as East Star, is a crescent never shown in a whole aspect, and that the lunar symbolism of the feminine had been transferred into Venus and recognized as the bringer of the light, or the carrier of the light, was actually originally a feminine prospect. So this is part of how women became associated with evil and darkness and mystery or intrigue as well.
Really. Really.
Oh but see, because the birther of the hero is the rising of the sun at dawn in solar doctrine.
Right.
So this Luciferianism is a semantical dilemma, but it's also genuinely a solar phenomenon. And we have to understand it's also a phenomenon of the evolving mythology in Egypt. And that's a big subject. We're not going to try to fully unravel that, but
Right.
I knew it was on your mind, and I know you're aware of it. So I wanted to mention it, because they are trying to marginalize. We have to understand when what we call secret society emerges above ground, above sub rosa, it's immediately infiltrated, and then the teachings perverted and then stigmatized by exposing the perverted teachings in the light of day, to stigmatize, marginalize, and bolster a campaign against it.
Very
So
true.
that's what I'm trying to say. Now let me explain the absolutism. As I said, with the rise or the fall of the Roman Empire, and the rise meant the rise of the Holy Roman Empire. Um, um, the papal seat became a prize to be won. So you have these legacy dynastic families jiving to get their guy on the throne.
That sounds familiar.
And yeah, and these are ancient legacy dynastic families that go clear into antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
And but what I'm saying is the papal seat is the central authority. So in order for the papacy to bring any European monarchs under their control, they only need gain the fealty of the king, and then that subjects his subjects to the authority of the papacy. But in England, it's different because they're sharing the power. And that's actually, we have to understand the Norman invasion of 1066. Before 1066, we could say it's easier to see where the line of English kings ends.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's easier. How am I trying to say that? It's easier to see where the line of English kings ends than it is to understand what happens after that, or so to speak. I'm not saying that right, but anyway, after 1066, the main thing I'm saying is that we have imposters on the throne. So you have these French Norman kings trying to assimilate culture, so they start to adorn themselves in Arthurian legend,
I
which is
see. Very
an
interesting.
yes. And then you had Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was basically, I would tell you, the ruling monarch, through Henry II, up through Henry or Richard the Lionheart and John, and then Henry III and William Marshall. She was the mastermind behind all of it, because she left Henry II and returned to Aquitaine, where she started the court of love and raised her sons to be courtly knights so they would learn how to assimilate English culture. But after 1066, many of the kings that were sitting on the English throne didn't even speak English at all.
Right.
But it was the sharing of the power between the aristocracy in England and Britain and the English throne that made it difficult for the papacy to make England a vassal of the church and Britain a papal fief, which is a land grant. And that's also, the idea of after 1066 was the aristocracy or land barons were holding the king to the standard of what's called the old laws of England under Edward the Confessor, or Harold II, who was the last of the English kings, Harold Godwinson. But it was the old laws of England from, Edward the Confessor, or the old laws of England, that actually are what the idea is about what people think of common law. That's where they came from. But this is
interesting. Okay.
right. So the struggle for power between, or the sharing of power between the barons in England and the English throne, is also what led up to the creating of the Magna Carta. Of course, there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of controversy surrounding John the First, but it's a very fascinating subject. Studying the English kings of England is one of the most fascinating things that you'll ever encounter. It's stranger than fiction,
It
but
really is. I was going to say something similar. I was going to say, when I started looking into it, you're 100% right that when I started looking into who was on the throne and the royal family and all that, and realizing that, like, they weren't even English. And when you dive into it's really interesting. And I don't think a lot of people really realize what's going on. I really think that they just haven't taken the time to look at this. And when I started diving into it, you're 100% right that there was so many imposters on the throne. It was all built on lies. Like, I don't know a better way to put it. And
interesting.
deceit.
Yeah, go ahead.
And deceit, I was going to say at the end.
Interestingly enough, there was a 12-year-old who did an article and showed that every U.S. president had direct lineage to John the First, with the exception of Martin Van Buren, and that was a mainstream article. So, I think it's safe to say that he was promiscuous to say the least. And it wasn't uncommon for, ruling bloodline dynasties to proliferate. And that goes, clear back into the ancient world, into
Mm-hmm.
ancient Babylon and Abraham doctrines and so forth. So it's nothing new, but it's something new in the modern world. And but the profundity is that were it not for the sharing of power between the barons and the English throne that made them resilient to the authority of the Roman papacy, these Eastern traditions would not have made their way into the West.
Right. Very true.
So our world would look quite different now, and we would have no way to recover what I say would be the only solution that we would have to get ourselves out of this, what I want to call human condition. And the human condition is slavery.
Right.
And I would like to put the whole discussion into context of government is slavery.
100%.
And as long as we believe in man's law, we have no use for the spiritual prospect, because the spiritual prospect is about liberating the species. It's not about predestination under the Benedictine ideal or the Augustine ideal. It's about freedom. It's about what happens here matters, and that ignorance is the only evil.
Right. And that's the toughest thing, is trying to get people to realize that, how important. I've been saying, Doug, for like a couple years now, like a lot of people are really upset because things aren't changing in the world. Like everything's kind of staying the same, and or if not, if I think it's getting worse. It's not, to me, it's not staying the same. It's only getting worse and worse. And I keep trying to tell people that this isn't a battle for, getting the right person into government or getting the right president or prime minister. In my case, this is a spiritual battle, and this is a battle of consciousness. And I think people don't want to look at it. I don't know why, but maybe it's because from the social engineering, they've done a good job at making people not want to look at that side, the spiritual side, or even acknowledge it, and kind of looking at what you were saying as the other side of it. And I think that I've been telling people that this is a spiritual battle. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, you're exactly right about that. It is a spiritual battle indeed. But again, the spiritual prospect is liberating the species.
100%.
It's about understanding our own sovereignty by knowing the self, and then learning to respect the sovereignty of all sentient beings.
Right.
So
and that's not what they're teaching, for sure.
right. So that,
you know,
yeah, and that redefines the term responsibility, and that's the part that people really don't want.
Yep. To take
And
responsibility.
yeah,
Point the
and
finger at everybody else.
there's so many factors that have led us into this condition that, like you said, we're only going to be scratching the surface. But I'll be looking forward to coming back on with you and us getting together, possibly on the Cubbyhole podcast, and
For
just
sure.
keeping the discussion going. Because I understand the difficulty of these things, and I understand what a lot of the knowledge is that needs to be understood to help see through this matrix.
Right. The
But
solution. Yep. I agree.
And we're supposed to be talking about secret societies, but we're not really pinpointing any, and that's okay, because see, what the real dilemma is not in the secret societies. Of course, one thing I wanted to say is that, let's say Freemasonry, for instance, in the modern world.
I was going to ask you about that, and the lodge
Yeah.
system, and that it's totally not what it was back in the ancient times. This
Right.
has been perverted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, the idea is that, the high initiates would be best qualified to be, rapid in quotes, the leaders of a society, because they understand the ancient science is the ideal situation. But that is not the case, because, as I said, there was a failure in the priest class. However, we have to understand the positive function of the secret society in the modern world is that they're trying to recover and preserve knowledge that's been deemed unfit by the church or a threat to the papacy. But, when you ask me in the ancient world, what was required to get into the secret societies. I had said in my last presentation, or the one I did at Seed 4 on secret societies, that it required that you had chosen a faith. They wouldn't let you in until you had chosen a faith. But I like the way Mark Passio gave his analogy about you had to swim underneath it or through this tunnel that was a minimum, like 3-minute swim. And then when you came out the other side, the first thing they would ask you is, what did you want more than anything when you were, swimming through that tunnel? And he said, air. And he said, well,
yes.
in order to be initiated in the secret society, you better want truth that bad.
Yep.
And my motto is, if we want truth, we have to labor for it as hard as we would labor for gold. So
I agree. I 100% agree, and it really frustrates me, Doug, that we have all this information at our fingertips, and we have a lot of great people that are discussing this information and doing presentations and podcasts and a plethora of other things that they're doing. And I just find that people just seem, to the most part, ignore it. They're not even hungry for this information, and we've never at any time have had so much information at our fingertips, and it just seems it's such a waste that people aren't really diving into this and wanting to learn more. I'm hoping that we can change that the more that we talk about it and more people come forward like yourself to talk about these topics and start educating people. I think that this is the time, no better time than now, with all the information that we do have access to.
I fully concur, and it's very well said, and I really appreciate all of the diligence that you've done, and that you're taking an interest and stepping forward to put the rhetoric out there and developing the courage and the willpower to do so, and you've already experienced the difficulties, so we can understand why people are having trouble, but we can't, it's understandable, but it's not acceptable. So we got to make sure we do our part to try to help people get over these hurdles and get them inspired and get them excited about it. And that's what I want to try to do. And I'm glad to hear you say that's what you want to do. And
100%. Yep.
And, yeah, go ahead.
Great. I'm so enjoying this talk. Thank you so much. Great stuff. Basically, I'm just looking at my bullet points, and we're covering exactly. It's going. I'm really happy that we're touching on these, because I think there's so much to uncover. So basically, when we're talking about, it seems that the Catholic Church and the Vatican and stuff, they're responsible for definitely a lot of what's going on. Would you not agree? Like the suppression of information, keeping people in this box. I think that it really traces back to England and the Vatican. Would you not agree?
Yeah, as I said, we have to understand divine right of kings and what the ramifications of it are in the modern world, because that's what matters, not politics.
Okay.
People still believe in politics. Could only be because they don't understand divine right of kings, and they don't understand the modus operandi of the Roman Church, which is a solar cult.
I tell people that. Yep.
So ultimately, we're going to need to understand the solar cult, that the world is not run from Washington, London, and Moscow. The world is run from Rome, Mecca, and Israel. Because you don't control 7.5 billion people with coercive force. You use mind control. Right. So you could call it the 3M formula as well. You could say Rome is the media arm, London is the financial arm, and the United States is the military arm. That's the 3M formula.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, I got to remember that one. Yep, definitely. And so what would you say, Doug, are the major secret societies of today that are doing the most, has the most influence? Would you say it was the Freemasons?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Perfect. That's what I was going to ask.
I was going to say that Freemasonry in the modern world functions as an interface between municipality and the public.
Interesting.
Whereas up through the Renaissance, coming out of the Dark Age, its function was to bring Eastern traditions and Eastern sciences and Greek sciences and philosophy into the East, where it was restricted or forbidden by the Roman Latin Christendom.
Right. Okay.
And
so they're definitely
but in the modern world, it's functioning as an interface as a vestigial legacy. We don't have the great scholars that are using it for what it should be used for, is to access the knowledge that are found in their libraries, which you may not have been able to find, through the Dark Age. You have to understand anything, books would be burned. People could be burned at the stake for challenging anything from the orthodoxies, how dangerous it was to have knowledge and bringing it into the West. So, but yeah, the secret or the Masonic societies are, functioning as an interface for municipality in the modern world, and I think we should define the term leadership.
Perfect.
There seems to be a little bit of a deficit on understanding leadership, so I want to try to put it in simple terms.
Okay.
Basically, we can break it down to two forms of leadership. The first would be transactional. So all government leadership is a form of transactional, and that's known as carrot and stick. But see, that's a confusing term too.
Right.
What it really means is punishment and reward.
I agree.
So transactional leadership is punishment and reward. A great example of that is like Steve Jobs, how he was the CEO of Apple, but he came, so difficult to work for because he was very hard on his employees, and severely punished them for not meeting a quota or what have you, and then ended up being removed as CEO from a company that he allegedly started, but he was a good example. But all government leadership is a form of transactional leadership, and that is punishment and reward. And then if we look at the Santa Claus tradition, that's a punishment and reward prospect. He knows when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. If you do bad, you don't get any toys for Christmas. If you do good, you get a reward. So it's transactional. So a form of or any form of leadership that is punishment and reward, that's transactional leadership. Okay. And then the other form would be transformational leadership, and that's where the idea of leading by example or inspiring somebody to follow in your footsteps. Basically, that's it. Transformational leadership. Right. So those are good terms to know. Now we got to understand, why people want to get behind the ideas. They're the idea that the best leaders should come from the secret societies, because what I was trying to say.
That's a big one, right? That's a big one.
Because what I was trying to say is that, in let's say in Alexandrian times, or dynastic Egypt, or prehistory times, the function of the secret society was the continuation of the education. Right. But you first had to choose a faith. So you get your general curriculum, then you go out of your regular school and you choose a faith, and then you could be accepted into a secret society. But the part of the reason for that was because they didn't want atheists in there, because they felt that atheists were unteachable.
Interesting. Okay.
So your question about modern secret societies is a tough one. There's a lot of them, and what their function.
People know Skull and Bones, the Bohemian
that's a good
Grove.
One. Right.
I've had interviews with people about a couple of, not Skull and Bones, but definitely Bohemian Grove.
And there's the Order of the New Templars, and the OTO, which a lot of people, think is a cult, and I wouldn't disagree, really.
It wouldn't surprise you.
But the rhetoric I'm looking for is lost knowledge from old Egypt, which is really anterior, and it goes way back. So, ideally, I will tell you that we will have to understand the evolution of Egyptian mythology and understand the expression of the Egyptian science with what I call sign language.
Very interesting.
And the science itself. What I want to tell you is what you are referring to as natural law. Because without it, that's what lets us slip into materialism, which leads to selfishness and self-preservation as the highest virtue, which is the nature of all government. Self-preservation is the highest virtue, and then everything else, the end justifies the means. But it leads to, from there, moral relativism. So we have
which
to
is
hammer.
rampant. Yep, that's
Yeah, and we
rampant
have
now.
to hammer on objective morality, and we have to understand that these are the sciences that teach it, and that's why they want them gone.
Yep, 100%.
And you have to learn, the correspondence. You have to be able to understand or read the sublime information, to be able to make the correspondences, to understand how you can actually observe the natural law functioning in the world.
Yep, yep, 100%.
And as I said, it's the science of causality. What you call natural law, I call the science of causality, or can call, but it's the knowledge of causes that puts us in closest proximity to source.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
Yep. And then that's what these new age religions are trying to pervert too, is they watering it down. Is I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Watering
what
down the
Mark
truth.
what Mark often refers to as their technique is dissuasion,
Yep.
to dissuade you. And then, as I said, the modus operandi of the Roman Church was to stigmatize everything non-Christian. That's a form of dissuasion. Oh, it's of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to look into that. It's of the devil. That's devil worship.
Yep. That's a great. Yeah.
That's how
Perfect.
they marginalize the emerging Rosicrucianism, which can be traced back to the 9th century, but definitely, the 13th century or the 14th century, and then the emergence of the Masonic Lodge in 1717 at the Apple Tree Tavern in England.
Right. And another good now that like you were kind of saying that they, as Mark was saying, that they kind of dissuade you by saying it's the devil and the work of the devil. And that's a great kind of way to probably end this interview. Not is on this topic, because I've talked to people about this, Doug, and I've asked a lot of people. And can you talk a little bit about what Satanism is, and how it has infiltrated pretty much every aspect of our world. Like I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, "Well, I don't believe in that." So they don't believe what I'm saying. They're like, that can't be happening," and that because they don't believe in it, they don't think that there is a group of people like that are running things that are very much believing in it and following it, and using this knowledge against us very effectively. I will always say that they're like master psychologists that just they're on the same game, plan. They got the same plan of attack, and they're going through with it as a unit. And we're so divided, and I just think it's because I think a lot of people, Doug, don't even realize the evil that they're up against, and that there is such thing as Satanism, and there is a group. It's infiltrated every aspect of our life. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
It'd be a pleasure. And you're right on point with this because, this is the central issue. As I said, they want to put a stigma on everything. So
Yep.
if we're talking about Satanism, first of all, we have to embrace Christian doctrine because that's based on the archetypal Christian devil.
Correct.
So that not only bolsters their doctrine, it stigmatizes anything unorthodox.
Right.
And then all they have to do, so if you accept the devil, for instance, as an actual being, then you're already ascribing to the dogma.
Mm-hmm.
But this comes from the old world. It's basically describing internal opposition, or the shaitan, the opposer, to be in cognitive dissonance, to be what George Orwell called doublethink, to be in contradiction with yourself internally. So if we don't want to literalize the devil and try to historicize the devil and make it, that's what the Christian church wants to do. Some people say, the ego's greatest trick was, or the devil's greatest trick was to convince you that it didn't exist.
Yep.
And I would say, no, the ego's greatest trick was to convince you that the devil does exist.
Right.
So,
Good point.
what I would describe Satanism as is simply pure selfishness, service to self, from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to sleep at night. Me, 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 me.
Yep.
What's in it for me? What can I do for me? And that's the first tenet of Satanism, selfishness, and that's self-preservation is your highest directive. And then that leads to the moral relativism, which is to refuse to discover and understand the objective morality, which leads us into social Darwinism, which was bolstered by the idea that the lion on the plains can take down a gazelle, so we can do the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. And it is a colossal ignorance, and then ultimately eugenics, because I would tell you anybody that supports government is a eugenicist de facto, whether they want to admit it or understand it or not.
Right. Yep. Very, very, very true. And I find it disturbing that a lot of people too, Doug, don't believe that it's infiltrated every part of our world, like the government, the schooling system, the health. It's rampant everywhere, and I see it. I guess maybe once you see it, you can't unsee it, but I see it everywhere, and it's just really amazing to me how people haven't, or maybe refusing to believe that such a thing is happening is a good way to put it. But the fact that they won't even consider it is what really gets me kind of heated up when I talk about it, because when you see it, you can't unsee it. And I try to tell people that this is happening. It's not a border thing. It's happening globally, and they're in every aspect of our life. And the only way to beat them is to get this knowledge that we're talking about, natural law and objective morality. But it's a uphill battle when people don't even want to acknowledge that such a thing even exists. Is what I'm finding.
Yes, and I understand, your struggle with this because I've experienced it and am experiencing it. I'm so glad that I was able to connect with you. I think that you and I can continue to hopefully make an impact
I hope
and
so.
get people to take another look and look a little deeper and start fleshing out some of these important authors and
That
one of the
yeah,
other
great.
techniques,
Yes,
yeah, one of the other techniques or one of the other things that we're dealing with is that inversion technique where they don't really create anything but they take everything and just flip it upside down.
very important.
And
Very
that's
important.
part of the phenomenon of them wanting to pervert teachings and then bring them into the light of day in perverted forms to expose them, to bolster or to marginalize them, to bolster a campaign against them. So
Yep.
that's something that I want to keep hammering on too. But I want to
It's
be hammering on natural law and moral relativism
me
and
too.
the deplorable ideology of order following, because the idea that we can abdicate our responsibility leaves us with a standing army in our midst, and that's the very thing the founding fathers warned us explicitly about.
Yep. Yep. And that's another hotbed topic I found out too, was when you start talking about order followers. And it's crazy when you start talking to people about this, especially if they're in the position of the military or in high government or police force or whatever. Like, you start talking to them about that and talking about this knowledge to them, they get, most of them get quite upset, because I think deep down they
You
know
might
it's true.
ruffle a few feathers. Yeah,
Oh,
you
oh
might ruffle.
yeah. And it's true, but I just think that that's a really important one, is order followers. I keep telling people, we're in this mess that we're in because people followed orders and didn't say
And
no.
believe in authority.
And
That's the religion of
yes,
authority, you
yep.
know.
And it's amazing how people are willing to give up rights and their freedoms and anything to this authority, this illusion of authority. And I saw
That's
it
the way
over
you
the
put
last
that.
couple of years. Definitely, what I can't say on YouTube, they'll flag me if I say anything about what happened. Yeah, I think you know what I mean. What's been
Yes,
going
I
on
do.
for the last
Yes,
couple
I
of
do.
years, and
Sure.
I saw what happened there. How quickly people were just willing to hand over their rights and freedom. And I've said many, many times, as anyone who's listened to any of my interviews, that I mean, a lot of people I've asked can't even describe what a right is by definition. So how hard is it? It's not a big stretch for me to see why people are handing over their rights, and that so willingly, when they don't even know what it is. It's
That's
really
right.
disturbing.
It's very disturbing. And let's make it clear that rights don't come from government. They're inherent
Exactly.
in
Right.
nature and they simply amount to any action that does not cause harm to another sentient being.
Yep.
So, and then we're going to deal with all the psychology, because it's not just a logical failure or a logical inadequacy. We're actually dealing with psychology, like denial, for instance. So that's one of the things that makes it so difficult. And ultimately, this colossal ignorance is the result of a lack of knowledge. But see, that can't be an excuse anymore, because we are in post-apocalyptic times in the
Yep.
sense that the truth is available, and it's up to, the individual responsibility is to seek it out and do the diligence and understand that there's something greater at work here than just man's ambition to be God.
Yep. And that's what it is. That's
Damn right, that's what it
that's
is.
exactly what it is man wanting to be God. And it's going to be and I agree with you too, Doug, 100%. There's no more excuses because as you said, the information is out there. If you're willing to find it, it's out there. I know because I find it. And then once you start meeting people that know this information, there you realize that there's a lot of people out there that have this information. They're taking it in, but I always tell people that because I know a lot of people that, and I was in this boat not only less than a year ago, so I mean I'm totally understand that even with myself that I was taking in this information, but I wasn't going through with the final step and putting the information back out there. I think a lot of people stop at taking the information in and think that okay, I've done my job. I know what's going on in the world. I know what it's controlled by, but that I try to tell people that that's not enough. You have to get involved and get out there with your voice and put this information out there because we have to use what these I call them dark psychologists that are the social engineers. That's what
It's
they're using.
appropriate.
Well,
That's
yes, I agree.
absolutely appropriate. And let me just add one more thing, because part of the confusion is surrounding the terms. It's semantical. For instance, the term cult
Very true.
that gets confused with occult,
Mm-hmm.
and occult becomes confused with a cult.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean? So let's just point out that occult means hidden.
Yep.
But a cult represents a group of people that ascribe to certain belief systems.
Yep.
Or but see, ultimately, it all comes from culture, which was driven, and the science and the mythology were all driven by agriculture. So these fertility rites, not understood, the end result is dogmatic religion. So I would tell you to reconcile across cultural epistemology,
Mm-hmm.
we have to restore pure forms of fertility rites. Otherwise, we will live in a world filled with religious dogma.
Yep, and I agree. And another thing I tell people too, Doug, is they got to start looking. And I learned this from Mark Passio too, from years of watching him, is to start learning what words really mean. I think that's so important that the words that people use every day, they don't even know what these words mean. And I find it fascinating now when I start learning the real roots of where these words that we use every day came from and their true meanings. And I think people need to start doing that too. They have to start realizing the words that they speak every day, what they actually mean, because there's a lot of information in just that word I found that they use. The words they
Absolutely.
use are used for a reason. I try to tell people it's not just random. They just didn't make it up out of their head for no reason. There's meaning behind these words and there's power behind them.
Yeah, one of the most profound things is, the study of etymology and philology is not only one of the most profound studies that you'll ever undertake, and one of the most revealing studies that you'll ever undertake, but it's also intriguing because when you go into it, you're going to find that no trespassing signs have already been posted everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So I'm just checking, keeping the track on time here, Doug, because I know we got about another probably 10 minutes or so. So
Sure.
I just want to ask you, can you recommend, because I want to get people on the right path of starting to look into the topics that we covered today. And you're welcome back, definitely, Doug, to come back anytime and we can continue this. I want to definitely start diving deeper into these topics with you. I just think
Hmm.
it was a great foundation to start with this interview just to scratch the surface.
Right.
And is there any books that you could recommend people
Yeah.
get? I would really like to, and I'll put links, guys, in the description for any of these books that Doug recommends or any websites, whatever it is. His information will all be in the description. But what are some good books that can get people started on this journey?
Well, anything King Arthur, I want you to just, get it and start getting your head around that. Most of my work is based on Jesse L. Weston's From Ritual to Romance, which culminated or constitutes the pinnacle of her writing career, which mostly dealt with Arthurian legend and Celtic and Norse culture. And it was the winner of the Crenshaw Prize in 1920. And the other authors that I've studied that I've determined are the most important authors, I would have to say, are Gerald Massey.
Okay. Gerald.
They must find it difficult, those who have taken the authority as the truth rather than the truth as the authority. Gerald Massey. So Gerald Massey's Egypt, the Light of the World. And then another author who was an apprentice of Massey is Alvin Boyd Kuhn.
Okay.
And I love Alvin Boyd Kuhn, very inspiring and very, very educated man. And Albert Churchward, who was also an apprentice of Massey, but the difference between Massey and Churchward is a Mason.
Okay.
So I
that
think
would give a very unique look then.
That's right. So I think that's why that Churchward was able to take Massey's work farther. And then Massey's work was based on J. Norman Lockyer, who made the astronomical connections that started Massey's new line of research. And then, of course, Manly P. Hall. You want to get as much Manly P. Hall as that you can get, and you can work with his online lectures that you can find. And there's a lot of them. I've used a lot of those. I've written a lot of those out. And, run down his books, of course, and some of the articles that he used to write for the All-Seeing Eye. Anything Manly P. Hall would be highly recommended. And of course, I want to recommend Mark Passio. Start with podcast 1 and work your way up through those, and that'll definitely give you the foundations to understand the deeper levels of the anthropology and the ethnology. And just take yourself seriously as a student. Don't be afraid of things. Just understand they do take time. Mm-hmm. And understand that the reason that most scholars fail is usually for the same reasons. So ideally, I think if you really expect to make some progress with this, I think you should push yourself with the idea in mind that you can and will exceed academia.
Yeah.
Because you can do it, and I believe in you. And it's all about self-love. You are worthy of truth. We are worthy of truth. We are worthy of knowing, and we can know, but not without doing the diligence. And we wouldn't want anything that we didn't earn.
Exactly.
We just think we do, but that's not our thinking.
Right.
And we know we have to earn it.
I agree. That I tell people that all the time, Doug, that it's going to take work, and you have to put in the work to learn this information. I know I do.
But don't think of it as work. The whole point is just to enjoy yourself. No, it's just kidding. But honestly, you should enjoy yourself. But yeah, it does get dark and it does get disturbing. But like I say, you don't want to keep just going down rabbit holes of conspiracy all day. But, you do need to get to a point where you realize that it's not a political solution. It's a spiritual one. And by that, I mean figuring out how to liberate the human species and what they were endeavoring to do in ancient Egypt before socialism returned and caused the collapse of the greatest civilization that the world has ever seen, even though they don't really know about it.
I agree 100%. It's so well said. So well said, Doug. And where can people find your work, your presentations? Can you let people know where they can find all that? And I'll put links in the description for that too, Doug.
Yeah, most of my work you can find on the OneGreatWorkNetwork, and there's a lot of other great content creators there, including Mark Passio. And it was Mark's site. Mark started the whole platform, and it's a great network, and there's a lot of great content creators there. And I'm on Nate Cap's Cubbyhole. So
right
Nate Cap,
we can see the sign, your logo right behind you.
That's right. So Nate Cap started the Cubbyhole, and Nate Cap and Brandon host the Cubbyhole. Sometimes I go in there and host the show, and sometimes I come in as a guest, and they have other guests, including Mark Passio has been on there. So that's a great place to get information, and they're doing a great job over there, and I'm glad to be a part of both these networks. And I'm glad to have, a constituency and supporting researchers that are doing the great work. So it's a real honor.
It sure is, and I agree. Tons of great content creators on the One Great Work Network. I've met so many amazing people, and they're so willing to give their knowledge and teach and talk to people. I know for me, anyways, when I talk to them, they're very willing to talk and have a conversation and exchange information and ideas. I think it's amazing. I wish it was all like that. I wish other sites were doing what Mark is doing.
Well, thanks to Mark, I'm noticing, some progress. And like I say, I was pretty isolated before I got onto the network, and now I actually have some people that I can interact
Right, me
with. And
too.
I want to give a shout out to Francisco Sani and Sean McCann and Will Keller. And there's a lot of other people. I can't mention them all. But, I want to give a shout out. And, guys, keep doing the great work. I love what you do. Chris Jansen, thanks for all your support. And keep doing the great work, guys.
I second everything you just said, 100%. There's too many to name, but everybody you mentioned, 100%. And
Yeah.
what do you have do you have anything planned in the future? What do you have coming up? Do you have any
Yes, I
ideas?
do.
I would love to hear
Oh,
about
yeah.
it.
Well, I've started the new presentation, The Depravity of the Socialist Mindset, and it turned out to be such a monolithic talk. I've got about 191 slides. I did the first part and ended it at 4.5 hours. I've got on slide 57. So I've got that to finish out. That could turn into another 8 hours.
Really?
And I got to finish that. And that's on my desk right in front of me. I'm trying to get that done. And then, like I said, I've got opportunity to go back on and do some more cubby holes, and I've been frequenting, or I'm wanting to frequent Francisco Sani's show, and I'm getting ready to do some movie breakdown shows with Ivan from Phoenix, because Ivan and I have done some shows in the past, and we both have cinematic knowledge that we can bring to the table and really do a deeper analysis on film.
That's super interesting. I'm looking forward to that for sure. But yeah, that sounds like you got a lot going on, and I hope you do complete that. I know it sounds huge what you have in front of you right now, but I hope you do get it completed and
Yeah,
get
I
that
will. I will.
information out there, because I think the
I definitely
information,
will.
yeah, is invaluable to get out there. And amazing stuff. And I really, like I said, I really enjoyed your presentations that on the topic that we were talking about.
So nice to hear.
Yeah, well, I'm just being honest. I really enjoyed them, and I've watched them actually a couple times now, because I try to tell people that when you get into this information, especially with some of the presentations, they get long and it's a lot of information. I try to tell people that, don't feel bad if you don't remember everything in one listen or one view. It just takes time to learn, and don't feel bad if you're not picking it up right away.
Yeah, you have to build it up. You have to build
Yes.
up your attention span. So if you're struggling, just understand that you're recognizing that your attention span might be in bad shape. So you got to work on it and build it up. And I don't, I want to tell you that a lot of the work that I put out in presentation form, some of it is advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say advanced, I mean you need a lot of prerequisite knowledge. You need an understanding that government is slavery.
Major realization.
You need to understand
Yep.
objective morality and natural law, really, before you even want to start, and astrotheology before you even want to start on my stuff. But you can start on it. Just, always be honest with yourself about where you actually are at, where you need to do the work. And, if you need some help, you will find some people that want to help you.
Yes.
And, maybe that wasn't the case in the past, but it is now. You can find people, and they will try to help you. And a lot of people that are doing the work are very gracious, and they'll do anything to help somebody get the opportunity to get their voice out there.
Right. I totally, I agree. Totally. I've met, like I said, as I was saying, amazing people that are very gracious with their time and the information that they have. They're willing to give it, teach you. Tech problems I've had people reach out and help me with that, because I'm learning as I go right now. So I definitely second that there's a lot of great people out there that are willing to do this and are doing the great work. And I also want to second too, Doug, that definitely if you're going to go to Mark Passio's site and watch his podcast, and as you said, start at number 1. That is key. I think a lot of people just start at the most recent one and they don't have a clue what's going on. And like you were
Not a
saying,
good idea.
there is a prerequisite to that, and even Mark says
Yeah.
that you have to start at number one. And I've
Yeah.
going up
You
to
don't go you don't go into physics without basic algebra, you know?
I totally agree. I've had a couple of my friends start watching his presentations, and they just kind of jump in with his latest one, and they don't know what he's talking about. And I'm like, I told you, you have to start at the beginning. There's a reason he does the things that he does, and so it's important. And I hope people do look at it, and I hope people find your work. As I said, Doug, I will leave links in the description for all the books you recommended, and definitely for all for the One Great Network, One Great Work Network, sorry, and your YouTube channel. I do know that you're on YouTube, so I will leave a link for that. And definitely, hopefully, people will be checking out your information because it's super important, and you're doing amazing stuff.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's really great to hear.
You're very welcome, and you're always welcome. As I said, I will definitely have you back, and I will be playing this in 2 weeks at Revolution Radio too, Doug. So this will be heard on Revolution Radio. Um,
Excellent.
we'll play that. I want to get you also on live though sometime, so I am putting that offer out right now. That I mean, just because of the time, and I mean, it's hard to kind of link up to do live, especially. But you're definitely
We'll
you're
do it.
welcome. Yeah, we're definitely gonna do it for
Yeah, I
sure.
want to do it.
Me too. Me too. So yeah, that wraps up the show, Doug. I mean, that's perfect. We got it right down, and I think you covered a lot of amazing, important topics that I hope people are taking an interest in now, and will look at deeper. So I hope that that happens, and you're definitely. I'm excited to get you back very soon, and we can continue and start going a little deeper on these topics and covering some other areas. I'm very excited to do that.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Rick.
You're very welcome,
Means a
and
lot.
yes, thank you for everything that you're doing. I really appreciate it, and I know everyone else does, Doug. So, have a great evening, and I will definitely be keeping in touch with you and staying in touch and setting up some more interviews for sure.
Sounds great. I'll look forward to it.
Me too. Take care, Doug, and have yourself a great evening, my friend.
And you do the same. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye. Well, there you have it. I tell you, that was some great information, guys. And I'm so thankful for Doug for coming on and taking the time to come and talk to us and to bring us this information. It's such an interesting topic and an important topic that I think people need to start looking into. I think it's, as Doug said, that is the greatest and foundation for discovering what is going on in why the world is the way that it is right now, the current world that we're in, and how far it does go back into the ancient times, as we were talking about, and how this information has been occulted from people, and then in turn, with as Doug was saying, in more modern times, it's gotten definitely infiltrated and perverted, is the best way to put it. And once you dive into this topic, as I'm finding out, it just is, as I keep saying, it's disturbing at times. It's very interesting, and I just think it's information that people need to start looking at. I think it's the foundation to learning natural law and objective morality, and all of the things that I talk about on here and my guests talk about. It's, you have to understand the basics, and start building off of that. So I'm looking forward to having Doug back very soon, so we can continue on the same topic, and branch off and start covering some more areas that we both feel are very important and will definitely help people build on their knowledge. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this, and I appreciate every one of you guys. I really do. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy bringing my guest on and meeting different people and meeting amazing people. So I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this. It shows that you do care about what's going on in this world, and you do want to start working on yourself and improving the situation. So I think that speaks volumes. And before I go, I just have a couple announcements, as I like to let you guys know that, and most of you know that I'm on Revolution Radio every Monday evening from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that's Studio A. And I also have a 1 hour show that I do, and that's Revolution Radio also. every Saturday evening from 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. It's only a 1 hour show. It's usually a show where I kind of just, talk about different things. And I call it the decompression hour because I need that hour just breaking away from research and talking maybe about music or some documentaries I've seen that I think you guys will enjoy. And so it's kind of my fun hour that I like to do. But I definitely hope you guys check it out, especially if you're a fan of the style of radio where that's what I grew up with. So I love listening to radio while I'm doing stuff around the house or sitting out in the garden, etc. I just enjoy that style of listening to radio. So please check it out. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Amazing content creators on there as well. Pretty much 24/7 there's a show going on live. So please check it out. You're going to definitely find somebody there that is going to be right up your alley or about what you're interested in listening to. So please, guys, check it out. I would super appreciate that. And I just also want to bring up now that Funnel 2 is on its way, and that is Freedom Under Natural Law Conference, which is September 10th and 11th, 2022. It is called Convergence. United for Freedom, focused on action, join the convergence. And amazing speakers going to be doing presentations. So definitely, please, guys, go check that out. It's a free event, so please check it out. And you just got to go to freedomundernaturallaw.com. That'll give you all the information and lots of great, many amazing speakers. Everybody here is an amazing speaker. So please check it out, guys, and check out all. I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually going to be doing a presentation on there, as you can see, and it's going to be my first time ever doing a presentation. So it's a great challenge. I'm looking forward to it. I'm working on it as we speak, and I'm really looking forward to it. So please, guys, remember, keep this in your mind and definitely check it out, September 10th and 11th. And you're going to be blown away by all of these amazing creators and the presentations they're going to be bringing forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys there, and it's going to be a great event. So I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to doing a presentation as well. So that is amazing stuff, guys. And just to wrap up, I hate asking, but please, if you're enjoying these interviews, enjoying the guest I'm bringing on, can you guys please hit the like button? It does help. I'm trying to break, I think, 200 subs right now. For some reason, I can't get over that 200 hump, but that's fine. I just ask that if you're enjoying this content, please hit the like, share, and the subscribe. I hate asking, but it is important. For some reason on the algorithm for YouTube, it makes a difference. So if you guys are enjoying it, that would be super helpful, guys, and I really do appreciate it. If you have any ideas for shows or you want any guests that you would like me to bring on that are covering these topics, I'm not hard to find. Just send me an email at binthinkingpodcast@gmail.com. And just send me a show idea, or if there's a guest that is covering these topics that I've been covering, let me know, and we can definitely see if I can get them on as a guest. I would love to do that for you guys. So thank you so much, guys. I've babbled enough at the end here. So thank you so much once again. I appreciate every one of you guys, and I can't say that enough. I really do appreciate every one of you guys. I appreciate my guests that I have on, for them doing the great work and getting this information out there. I think that this is the time now that people need to stand and make their voices heard. This is the moment, and when you look back in time, are you going to say that you were one of the people that stood on the sidelines waiting for somebody else to take action? Or are you going to be one of those people that said, I stood up and I made my voice heard and I took action and I fought back? I know where I want to be on that. I know what side I want to be on. So it's just something to think about, guys. So take care, guys, and I'm definitely looking forward to chatting with you, and I'll have another guest coming up very shortly. I got a lot of great guests lined up covering a lot of the great topics. So just, hit the share button and hit the little dingy button there, the notification one, so when I get a video up, you guys get notified right away. Take care, guys. Stay safe, and most of all, take care of each other, because that is very important.
you interested in the paranormal, murder mysteries, cryptocurrency, and thought-provoking interviews? Then check out Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking on YouTube, or every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Studio A at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Welcome to the Crypt.